Okay, so I initially hadn't thought that I was going to make another video in 3 months because I thought that was too close to the first one and there wouldn't be enough to say, but there's been a couple of things that have changed, so I figured I may as well. The main thing is that I'm essentially monolingual just with Anki cards. I started doing this like pretty soon after I made that first video, I think. And it's been pretty good, like it hasn't been too difficult, just because I did it quite slowly. So my card setup, I kind of just want to keep track of what my card setups were like throughout doing this. So I don't know whether it's particularly interesting to anyone watching, but so this is one of the cards that I got from a novel that I've taken in, such as Sentence on the Front.
Erleichtert.
And I usually will put the focus morph, get like a native speak reading of it, and that in the back, and then the definition. And I've liked to put a lot of example sentences, especially for like the different ways that you can use the word. The dictionary words that I've taken for, I haven't actually had to make that many dictionary words, just because I'm picking definitions that I don't need to make new cards for. But those are bilingual.
Vortäuschen.
Sometimes I will just put the monolingual definition on as well. And then subs to SRS. I've got the front field hidden, so I have like a hotkey to reveal that, and then again on the back it's the same, just the picture. I find that having the picture on the front, I was connecting the sentence to the picture rather than remembering what the sentence meant. And I realised that's why I was going through my cards so quickly. I have some stats that I'll put up now in a sec, but I found that it was a lot better putting the picture on the back because I felt like it was a crutch. So that's my card stuff at the moment. So I was actually quite surprised when I looked through my Anki stats. So I've saved one a month. For some reason I don't have the month of December, but I've got September up until January. And the thing that I noticed was my number of reviews. So it says here my number of reviews for the 29 days. I'm assuming that's for the 29 days. 5,700. That seems like a lot to me. And then 900 minutes. And the reason that this was so high, just in comparison, like it goes down a lot more, I'll show you in a sec. The reason it was so high was because I was using pre-made decks that along with subs to SRS, but the only thing that I was doing with the subs to SRS, because I hadn't gone monolingual, was that I was using the German and English subtitle files. So I literally just had the German on the front and the English subtitle sentence on the back, which I'm sure, like, it was fine at the stage that I was doing it and it did help, but I'm sure like there was a lot of cards that the sentence on the back was like the English equivalent was using different verbs. It was probably in some stages like completely different sentences almost. So it wasn't the best. The pre-made deck also it was just a Google translation on the back, which perhaps was slightly more useful. I don't really know, but that's why I was going through them so quickly, because I was able to do so many new cards a day. I mean, at one stage I had like 40 cards a day just because they were so quick to get through, and it didn't like cost me anything to make them because they were already just there. I since stopped doing that, so I have my more recent, so I'll start in October. So October had 4,000 reviews with 500 minutes, and the reason that went down so much was because I might have mentioned this in the first video, I started doing reviews on my desktop instead of on my phone, which was so much quicker, especially using like keyboard shortcuts once I had the Loki Anki set up. It was just so much quicker to do that. So that's October, and then November, reviews are going down again. Time is going down a little bit, so I can see that my answer time is kind of fluctuating. So it goes from 7.7 to 6 in October, and then September it was 9.7. I think that was probably because I was still on my phone, possibly. But then the big thing is, unfortunately I don't have December. I forgot to save it for December, but January. So this is when I was done with pre-made decks. My reviews went all the way down because I was adding so much less cards. My time is kind of similar, just because my answer time went up, because like I said, with the having the picture on the front, I was going through the cards so quickly, and I realized after a while I wasn't actually remembering what the meaning of the words was. I just remembered that I knew that card, and so that wasn't great. So I stopped. I really made more effort to concentrate on what the meaning of the cards were, so that's why the answer time went up a lot, and I feel like that's helped a lot as well. And I probably spend more time, I don't know whether Anki counts the time that you are on the back of the card, I'm not really sure, but I do spend more time reading the back of the card just because I put so many example sentences on it as well. So that's one of the big things that I've noticed, is my time in Anki has like dropped drastically, but I'm happy about that. So like my daily reviews are like really low. I'll get them done in like 20 minutes. The card making, I think I already mentioned, I haven't been great about it, just because it takes longer and it's time that I hadn't had to set aside before. I do enjoy making the cards, but it's just sometimes I forget to do it, and by the time I remember, it's the evening, and like I really don't feel like sitting down for another half an hour in Anki looking up words. Yeah, so I'm not too worried about that at the moment. Okay, so that's Anki stats, monolingual, card making. So my comprehension it's definitely gone up. So that was one of the things that I realised when rewatching a bit of my old video. I said my comprehension was about 40%. Now I feel like it ranges more between 60 and 80, like 80 being like the very, very high end of things. I wonder actually if I have... Okay, so one of the interesting things that I realised the last couple of weeks is when I very first started MIA and I was trying to find stuff that I wanted to watch, I was like, oh, I'll watch Parks and Rec because I really like that. But I was trying to watch it and I just understood so little of it that it wasn't even enjoyable, because I knew I was just missing, like, the comedy show. You want to enjoy the comedy, and I couldn't understand anything of it. But recently I went back to it because it's on Prime Video, and like I can understand it about as well as I can understand most of the stuff that I'm watching on Netflix, which has been really good. So I've been really into that. I also rewatched one of the TV shows that I started with. That was like a new TV show. It wasn't something I was rewatching. I went back and I watched that, and I noticed straight away that I was picking up on things that I hadn't noticed the first time. So that's been great. As far as YouTube stuff goes now, I do watch a lot of YouTube. I actually have stats for, where is it? Here. On the app on your phone, the YouTube one, you can get your watch time and it gives you like this graph for the week. So most of the time I spent like an hour and a half in the morning, and then I suppose this day it was 3.5, bit over. That's because I would have been watching things later on in the day, but most of the time my main YouTube watching time is in the morning when I'm like having coffee and I can sit down for about an hour and just watch stuff. This is my podcast app, so I usually listen to about an hour of the podcast that I'm listening to at the moment each day. And the stuff that I'm watching is a lot of documentary stuff. So this channel in particular, they have a lot of like 40 minute things. I find that's what I've been enjoying mostly. And because it's like factual, my comprehension is, a fair bit lower. I can still follow it, and because it's like a documentary, a lot of the time it's very visual, so that's been good. My reading, I finished the first book that I started, that I mentioned in the first video. I think I took about a month and a half to read that. Then I read The Curious Incident of the Dog in the Nighttime, and I really, really enjoyed that. I found it was really easy to read in the sense of the vocabulary that was used, because the narrator is autistic. He's not using a lot of flowery language, so it's a lot more straightforward, and I really enjoyed that. I was able to understand so much of it, because it had been a book that I'd wanted to read in general anyway. And I read that on my Kindle, which was the first book in German I've read on the Kindle, and being able to look up the words was really good. And before this, I've never read a full book on my Kindle because I just don't enjoy it. I prefer paperbacks. But after reading this book, actually halfway through reading this book, I got myself a new Kindle, just because the one I had was kind of old and it was a bit annoying. So I have a new one, and that's definitely how I'm going to be reading in the future. It's too handy to pass up on. And so the book I've been reading the last week or two is this. I read the first book like years and years ago, and I was happily surprised that I was able to read it. And one of the ways that I've been checking my, like, how much I think I'll be able to understand something is with the readability analyzer, and I don't know why I'd never tried to use this before, because it's great. So I've run a good couple of books through this, and what I've figured out is when the readability report tells me that like the readability percentage is 80% or above, that's when I can read it enough to follow the story. If it's below that, like at the moment, like the first Harry Potter book I've put that through, it's at like 74%, and there's too many words in it that I don't know to be able to follow it. But once it hits about 80% for me, that's when I've been able to understand enough to follow it, which has been really good. And I was actually watching, I think, Dave Otaku's videos recently, and he gave the analogy of it's like reading through a cloud. And I'm like, yeah, that's exactly it. It's like fuzzy. You get the like general picture of what's going on, but not everything. So I feel like that's sort of where I'm at. Like I'm with the book that I'm reading, this one here. Like I definitely get enough that I can follow the action of everything that's happening. Some of the stuff does kind of go over my head, though, maybe one or two sentences every now and again that I just won't get anything out of. And another thing that I've realised for the Kindle, so I'm assuming this is for most Kindles, but I'm not 100% sure. So what I find was to be able to track your reading, if you set up a Amazon Fire Kids account on your Kindle, that gives you a way to track your progress, so to track your daily reading, which I found was really good. So I haven't read anything today, but this is from yesterday. So it tells me how many minutes I've read, how many pages, and I thought this was really interesting. It tells me how many words I've looked up. So I did the kind of maths with that, and it evens out between the 2 days of data that I have here, that I look up a word every 1 or 2 minutes, which I think is fine. And it just gives you some general information on your reading stuff. So I thought that was really handy to have. There are a few limitations that the Kindle puts on these like kid account things, but it's nothing that's going to get in the way. It just means you can't get onto the internet, in the sense of like when you long press a word, you can't view the Wikipedia article for it. But that's not really an issue. So I really enjoyed having that. It's been really helpful. Anything else for reading? I think that's about it for reading. Yeah, so I think that's most of what's been going on the last couple of months. My daily immersion, I was trying to figure out how much I was doing. So I have the stats from reading, but that's only been like in the last week that I've really gotten into regularly reading. So combined with YouTube and listening to the podcast, that's at least 2 or 3 hours of listening, and then I have some Netflix on top of that, which really ranges from 1 or 2 episodes of something a day to maybe 4 or 5. So I think on an average day it can range from, like, my total immersion, like active stuff. I'm saying active for the podcast because I am like listening to it. I'm not listening to it most of the time when I'm like doing something else. I'm paying attention to it. So I think my active immersion is probably between 2 hours at the low end and then 4 maybe 5 on like a good day. And I feel like, judging by the progress that I've made in the last couple of months, that's enough to keep going at like a pretty okay rate. I have wondered a lot how much impact the fact that German is so close to English will have on how much time it's going to take me. I know I've watched a lot of like Matt's Q&As where he's talked a bit about how long like the time impact European languages, or just a language that's closer to your native, has. It does seem like it is pretty significant, because like just noticing myself, there's so much the same with English and German. Like, it's funny sometimes. So I do feel like there's definitely that big advantage that it's so close to English. There's just not as much different things to get used to. So what I'm hoping for in the future is that if I give myself another 6 to 8 months to just get my comprehension up, I'm hoping that that's enough time. Like, realistically, I actually have no clue. Like, these are just guesses. I'm assuming it will take me at least 6 months to get my comprehension up to the 90s, and then another couple of months after that before I can probably comfortably start outputting. Another thing to do with output. I've been really curious, because it's been 6 months since I'd had any sort of speaking practice, and 6 months of doing this, and because I noticed my comprehension shot up from, I'm going to say I started at about 20% and now I'm between 60 and 80-ish. I was really curious as to what impact that might have had on the low level of speaking that I had to begin with. So I did one like hour italki lesson with one of my old teachers, and didn't go fantastically. He was like, well, you haven't gotten any worse, and I was like, okay, sweet. But really, like, it's obviously not been long enough for anything to like penetrate my mind enough to come out when I'm trying to speak. Like, I can definitely think of things to say in my head a lot easier than I had been able to before, but it's just little things that wouldn't really come up in conversation that much. But I can see that it's at least starting a little bit. Yeah, so I think that's about it. I'm just going to concentrate on trying to do a few cards every day, even if it's only like 2 or 3, just to do something, because I can feel the effects of Anki when I do it regularly, like add new cards regularly. And realistically, it's not going to take me more than an hour and a half max to do my reviews and make new cards. So I can probably limit Anki to 1 hour a day and get a couple of new cards in every day, and that should be fine. I'm going to keep up with reading, really enjoyed that. I do notice that I do pick up words while I'm reading, like not very many, but I do notice that. I think that's everything. Yeah, so if my progress continues the same way, then maybe I'll make another update in 3 months. I'll just play it by ear and see when I feel like there's been enough changes to make another one. So, yep, probably 3 months and then I'll be back.